Light years away from Earth, there's a generation ship hurtling through space at a frightening speed. It's on a great journey towards a distant planet, which the travelers hope to terraform. When compared to a nice rocky world, a spaceship is a very fragile environment, and all its systems have to be constantly maintained. The survival of those on board depends on the ship being in good repair, and in the event of a mistake, there will be nowhere for people to escape. They will be marooned out in interstellar space. That is no small anxiety for the mechanics, and so, to ease their minds, they have learned to pay their respects to the god of engineering, sitting in his temple of wires, bolts, and microchips. But the starship is not all plastic and metal. It also houses a closed ecosystem which provides the travelers with their food and their oxygen. And human beings are not the only animals on board. All sorts of micro and mesofauna inhabit the ship, as well as larger arthropods such as honeybees, fulfilling the important task of pollinating crops. And if an animal goes extinct, that is that, it's never coming back. And all the ecosystem services it provided are forever gone as well. So the plants and animals must be carefully observed, and all their relationships must be kept in balance, with every act of caretaking also being an act worshipping the god of the biome. But keeping the ecosystem running is not enough in itself. Inbreeding must be prevented, and healthy genetic diversity must be maintained among all living things on the ship, especially among human beings, since their descendants will colonize the planet that lies at the destination, and it will be centuries, if not millennia, before anyone comes to visit. And as the ship biologists keep an eye on the genes of their bees and their crops, and the prospective parents receive genetic counseling before being allowed to conceive, they all come into the presence of the god of the genome. But before the ship's departure back on Earth, the team that had designed the generation ship and its systems had worried a lot about the possibility of human error, sabotage, or wild flights of fancy, so they made the computers that keep the ship on its planned course completely inaccessible. As a result, to the inhabitants of the ship, the journey itself is the only thing that neither requires nor admits any possibility of human maintenance. While all the other gods struggle like infants that would die without the constant attention of their caretakers, the god of the journey quietly sits in the vastness of his power, pushing the ship forward with a steady hand across light years of distance, keeping it safe from accident and harm. It's a great comfort, and yet it's terrifying. How do you take care of a god like that? How do you ensure his continued existence? The most powerful thing people could possibly do is sacrifice a human life. But rather than choosing a victim, they create the sacrifice by having a man volunteer some sperm and a woman volunteer an egg, while another woman volunteers her womb. And once the sacrifice is born, it is everybody's child, doted on, spoiled, and obliged as much as one can. On the child's 5th birthday, the ship holds a great festival, with lots of food, song and dance. The sacrifice is given many presents, and everyone takes the time to bid the child a goodbye, because towards the end of the merriment, a man in a spacesuit takes the sacrifice to a hatch and pushes it out of the ship into the vacuum of space, to be consumed by the god of the journey. All the water in the child's body, all the nutrients, every atom that made up its existence, are forever lost from the ship's isolated and fragile ecosystem. There could not be a sacrifice more powerful than that. But the god of recycling gets a snub, and it's important to immediately compensate him for it, so all the gifts the child received are destroyed and recycled at the end of the same day. Every sacrifice lives for 5 years, or 1,826 days, and this period of days is named after the sacrificial child that lives out its life in the course of its duration. It is also the most relevant and the most meaningful measure of time on the ship, much more meaningful than the year count happening on the distant Earth, and the time between the death of the previous sacrifice and the birth of the new one is an in-between time, nameless, vague, its solidity somewhat uncertain, a bad time to make an important decision or give birth to a new life. The ship will leave a long line of sacrificed children along its route, until eventually, getting closer to the destination, the travelers will have only one more 1826-day period left to observe. Only one more sacrifice. Maybe she will be a girl, and her role on the ship will not be kept a secret from her. She will know that once she turns 5, she will leave the ship, and the god of the journey will consume her somehow. So she will sometimes imagine herself lying on the god's plate, and him sitting in the vast cafeteria of space among the stars, slicing her up with his knife, and she will look like a boiled potato inside. Once the day of the final sacrifice comes, after the big party, she'll be brought to the hatch. The moment she is let go, she will see the ship disappear in the distance in a blink of an eye, and long before finding herself on the god's plate, she will pass out and die. The inhabitants of the ship will spend the tail end of their generations-long voyage in deep sadness, mourning the impending death of the god of the journey. Then they will reach their destination, and at last, the time of the god of arrival will start.